Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. And we're live. Okay, perfect. We are coming back at you. We've just come off the tail end of like some really exciting guest episodes. Some of which you will have heard by the time we release this one. Some are upcoming.
Yes.
After the fact. So fucking cool. But
just batch recording things.
But today, we actually wanted to cover a little bit about GM burnout, as well as like handling and managing player engagement in your games.
Yes.
DM burnout specifically.
Yeah. From like a player perspective is like maybe you have a DM that experiences it, and then also from a DM perspective is like managing it and self-care, I think.
100%. I think there's something really important to say about like I specifically feel this because like I have the itch to play as many games as possible. If I could quit my job and I could just play D&D all the time, I 100% probably would. Would I eventually burn out? Probably. But I don't know. It's
if I could just play role-playing games and write
that would be a
do
dream.
That's the ideal.
That's the ideal
that's my
world
ideal
we're living in.
Yeah.
But like I think for me, like I'm starting to get a lot of that because like again, I started DMing this year. And I already have that itch sometimes when I'll be conceptualizing games that I'm like, I want to run it more than anything humanly possible.
But you don't want to burn yourself out.
I don't want to burn myself out. And then also there's an element of like managing my real life responsibilities. And understanding, like for example, like our Strixhaven game is a once a month game.
Yes. Yeah.
Mostly out of necessity because like half our players live in a different city.
Yep.
So it's like not super feasible or realistic to expect all to come in bi-weekly, especially not weekly.
Yeah, we used to do. I used to be the only person driving down bi-weekly for Ravenloft.
Yeah.
And that was, so it's like half my weekends were traveling, which when that got combined with like work trips and other things, where it's like I would have 6-8 weeks where there was no weekend that I was home.
Yeah.
And as like an introverted extrovert, or an extroverted introvert, that one. Yeah, that one. It's that one. That was rough. Like I'd be very tired and very run down and stressed. So like going down once a month and saying like, all right, we'll just play just a big old session, just a long lady,
just a big heaping session
for like once a month is. I wish we could play more. And like every time we leave, I'm always like, damn, I would love to be able to play next weekend. But on the whole, it's a much better sustainable cadence for everybody.
Spiritually, I would love for us to play on a weekly basis. Like, that would be great. Realistically, not only the fact that y'all live that far away, but also realistically with like my real life job and other things that like I have on my itinerary because I'm also actively studying and doing other things and working on projects like.
And you're a player in other campaigns.
And I'm a player in other campaigns. I'm a candle burning at like several different ends.
Yeah, I feel that.
And I was like, I don't know that I could manage to prep even bi-weekly.
That's a lot of prep.
It's a lot of prep, and
it doesn't leave much time for, I feel like, you, especially as the DM, or even us as the players, to like appreciate and enjoy the session we've just played. Whereas like because we have a month, like we'll play and then the rest of that weekend, 'cause, like we play on Saturdays and we play another campaign on Sundays, and then Bex and I drive home. But like we get to sit and like dissect all the weird little micro interactions that happened and like hypothesize and get our like beautiful mind.
I haven't even thought about that. I would love to be a fly on the wall on your drive home when you're fucking dissecting.
Oh, the last time Bex and I drove home, I think we talked the whole time. We played nary a song or a podcast or anything.
For the whole 3 hour
It was just 3 hours of us talking about like our characters and it's good shit. It's good stimmy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like we have the space to do that, and then also like OSRP is helpful too with like feeding that gremlin.
Need.
And also similar with me with Vampire the Masquerade of like if I had to, I mean I've been we've had one session and like you guys loved it, but it felt very slapdash to me, and I did not have the materials that I needed to like run that effectively. Of my own kind of doing, I sort of volunteered to run it, and then I was realized like, oh shit, I've done no prep for this. So we're just gonna hope, let the spirit move us. But like I think running that more than once a month, it would take a level of organization and stuff that I don't know if I would always have ability or like capacity to do, like physically or mentally.
Yeah.
And it's like I know I can do it once a month, right? Because you can space things out, or you can do the neurodivergent thing and do it all the night before. Yeah. Like whatever you need to do.
This is also with the context of like what I've come to realize relatively recently. Because every time you or me or Alyssa or Bex talk about our games to people, we're a little bit of an outlier in the space.
Also, yeah.
Because we have a tendency to play 6 to 8 hour games. We used to play like 8 to 12-hour games.
Yeah.
And we've like knocked it down to 6 to 8. And then
the next session's going to have to be 8 to 12.
The next session is going to be an 8 to 12 hour session because of how much we have to fit into it.
But also a lot of that is improv. It's not an 8-hour dungeon crawl. It's not. Yeah. So it's not like 8 hours of combat. It's a lot of just us playing off each other and living our theater kid fantasies.
Yeah, but I've come to realize that a lot of people, even in their in-person games that they do like weekly or whatever, they're like more of like a 3 to 4 hour session situation. Like coming to realize that it's like, okay, no, there is a balance of like, yeah, we only get to play once a month. However, we're getting about like 2 to 3 sessions worth.
Like, yeah, 2.5 sessions of
in
D&D.
one fell swoop.
Exactly. Yeah.
And understanding like what is best suited for you and what is the most sustainable to you. Because I know that like for me right now where I'm at, I don't think I could run a weekly or bi-weekly game.
No, I don't either.
It's a delicate balance. Like, but then also there is the element of like, there are so many fucking games that I want to run. There's so many one shots I would love to play.
Like that, you sent us all that like stuff about the like Dragon Age, and I was like, damn, are we about to start running this bitch?
I'm hyper fixating it so bad
because it would be so fun.
I'm also like struggling and looking at my life calendar, and I'm like, where would that bitch even fit?
And we could do like a mega space out where like we could alternate, even with like do Dragon Age 1 month, do VTM the next month. Like we could do something like that, or we could do Dragon Age every other month or something. Like there is a ways that we could do it. But it's just like there are only so many weekends in a month
while still maintaining like a normal social atmosphere.
Exactly.
That is non-D&D related.
Yeah, which like I did not have when we played Ravenloft. Like, I mean, I had some friends out in Austin, but it was almost impossible for me to have any kind of sustainable social life out here because I was either gone or I was exhausted and needing to like recover because I'm also like working during the week and like was in a really stressful job for a lot of that and all that jazz. So it's tough.
Yeah. It's real hard when you're like, if I had all the resources in the world, I would be sitting here every single day and playing this game with a million different people.
For sure.
But it's so hard to manage. But then also at the same time, it's like, for me, man, like the way that I feel after a Strixhaven game is one, like I'm equal parts rocking so much good brain chemicals off of like the success of the session, the praise that my players give me, because I do be a praise kinko.
Yeah.
We
all are truly.
At the same time, I'm also so mentally drained.
Yeah.
After the fact.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, my brain was churning that
you
whole
never
time.
Really get to turn off where it's like as we kind of rotate around, and because it's a lot of us rotating through our own vignettes, and then we're freaking out and reacting to everything else that's happening to another player character, but you never really get to pause.
I'm very much like having to be paying attention, and I'm also equally engaged, but then at the same time I'm like, I have to take in all the information of like what you guys are doing and saying and who you're talking to and what comes out of this interaction and how does that play into the big brain schemes, and then I'm also having to think about the direction that I'm taking y'all on next after the scene and whatever, and making sure like, oh, did this player get enough screen time and whatever, and like managing all of that. And so by the end of it, I'm like, y'all are sitting in my living room talking about the session, and I feel like I'm melting into the couch.
Elevator music behind your eyes. Yeah, which like I had that I didn't really account for how different that would feel until I have started running a game. And yeah, it's a lot of like trying to maintain your own energy and make sure you're giving each player the same amount of like energy and enthusiasm. And like, yeah, all the scenes are different, but I think there are always some that are naturally easier to like slot into a groove. And like in our like Bex's character has like this teenage like cyber Q-esque girl that works with her, so like that character is going to be like our big yes and just chaos gremlin baby. So like that scene we got in that banter and it was really easy. And then there were like other scenes where like we were in court or something like that, and it was I had to be more cerebrally focused on everything that was at play and make sure I'm keeping all these plates spinning.
Yeah.
And that's when I start and I'm like, am I maintaining this well enough? Like, is it engaging enough? Are things sort of falling flat because I am trying to have a hand in every fire?
Yeah. And those scenes, especially like when running a big scene like that, which like I will give you so much credit because like
I really did that. Yeah.
I was coming off the tail end of my own like big scene where I'm like, cool. I'm now realizing I have to run a room of like 15 important NPCs, and then
y'all. So it was 10?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like so. It was like
the 4 sets of parents, so that's 8.
Well, Jack has a brother. Only one brother.
Oh, that's true.
And so you had Ambrose.
I just had Ambrose. So 6, 7, and then 8 with Poppin friend.
Poppin friend, yeah. So like 8 NPCs.
Raina's 2. I feel like
Raina counts as 2.
Raina counts as 2.
Raina counts as 2.
Mask Raina and Shadow Mommy Raina.
Yeah, those are 2 different.
So yeah, cool. Like 8 to 10, and then I had this in my just grand wise decision making capacity. Decided to do that to myself the first time I ran anything ever, because of course I did. And I'm like, fuck, I have to run a whole court. Like I had to make some very quick like game time decisions. And I'm like, okay, everybody can't be at fucking court today. Like we had like none of the sheriffs were there. I was like, I didn't introduce everyone, but it was trying to keep, like having like your sire come in and have like hint at some of the dynamics and like show the other players what's going on between y'all, and hint at his dynamic with the prince and with her new seneschal, and like that there's a fucking new seneschal, and like what happened to the old one, who was her sire. Like all of, and trying to drop hints without like making things so obvious that it takes the fun out of it. And like
it's a lot of management behind
like,
the scenes.
It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of cognitive load too.
Yeah. And like you really got to take care of yourself after each session, because I like as soon as y'all like we decide to go to bed, the way I crash.
Yeah. Just sleep like you're dead.
Fully. But it's also like, I don't know, like I think about scenes like that, and I think having respect for all of that mental work that happens behind the screen has changed how I play
for sure
games, and like how I view DMs and as they're running the game. And like I think my hustle culture is a little lessened as a player.
True. Yeah.
Once I've started DMing, because and like if I do, I feel like now I have a better idea of how to rationalize it and make it make sense, rather than just be like asking advantage for advantage's sake.
Yeah, see, I don't do a lot of that, but I do hustle for like obscure applications of tools and spells, and just like if I say some off the wall shit, can we roll to see what the reaction would be? Like that's more of mine than just trying to pull it out of my like I'm pretty, can I have advantage? Like I've done it, but I try not to do that a ton. But yeah, even that, like we had that moment in a recent game where I rolled an unfortunate nat 20 well, not really unfortunate, but an awkward nat 20 and found something that shouldn't have even existed. And I'm like, damn, it do be weird sometimes when you fly too close to the sun and your wings don't melt and you don't pull an Icarus. And then you just get to keep on gliding.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah. And you almost tried to like cop yourself out of
I almost
nat
like
20.
Yeah, like I said it and then I was kind of like, like we can change it. We can do something
And I was
else.
like,
And you're like, no,
you got a nat 20.
You're like, no, you find something. And I'm like, well, fuck, now I feel threatened. I'm in danger.
I found something I wasn't supposed to. Mother's going to punish me. Oh my god. No, but like I think
book is a mimic.
The book is a mimic. No, the having that experience and then understanding how much of an effect like running a game has on you has changed the way that I approach DMs and as a player.
For sure. Sure.
But it is like a matter of like I could definitely see how if I was running games similar to that on a weekly or even bi-weekly basis. I don't know if I'm like slowly but surely starting to find where my bandwidth is on that because there are games that I really want to play. I want to run this Dragon Age campaign. I'm very passionate about it, but I'm also trying to figure out like will I run it as an in-person game? It's not really feasible with the way that we're like how far we're all living. So
like if we play it online, like you and I play online, I think, but like all of our players don't really enjoy it. So it's like, well, then is that something that we can do? And it just being adults and trying to coordinate anything is difficult. And like the four of us are also an outlier in the sense of like, 'cause, like you play weekly campaigns like during the week, and I do as well. It's not every week; it's usually every 2 to 3, I would say. And we play online during the week, and like it's 2 hours maybe, and then like we're done because it's like 10 p.m. I'm like, hey, we got to go to work tomorrow.
Oh yeah, chief.
So it's a very different vibe than like the Strixhaven campaigns and the Alderaan campaign that we play on the weekend. And the fact that like all of our players are willing and able to fully dedicate a weekend to just diving into that fantasy world and living there for like 48 hours is rare and is so cool. I think that's something where we had that with Ravenloft too, and so we've gotten a bit spoiled to that too. Like I don't think that's is a universal experience. Like we might, because it's hard, and I mean that is also a benefit of us playing once a month. Is that's much more realistic to do.
It's much more realistic as a schedule, and it's also like the universal struggle in the TTRPG community is scheduling.
Yeah, and like we rarely have. I don't know that we've ever had a session that we've just had to cancel. We've had sessions where like maybe a player couldn't come down, or like I've certainly had a handful of sessions because like just chronically ill things where I'm like in a flare up and I'm like, hey, I can't do anything other than lay and stare at the ceiling. So it's like I've missed some, and like that's kind of happened with everybody at different times. But I don't know that we've ever had a session at any point where the four of us have been playing together that was just a wash.
Yeah, because I think also generally in our group, we tend to, if one and certainly if 2 players can't make it, we're like, ain't no way we're playing this without you there.
Yeah, we'll just postpone and then like schedule. And like we were debating weekends and stuff. And then if something were to happen, like with Ravenloft, people have more flexible work schedules than like us 9 to 5 hoes who are just, we know where we're going to be.
Yeah.
There was months like we would skip a month. There was a month where like some of us would need to step away just to like cope with other life stuff. And so we had like a couple months of a break and then we come back.
Yeah. But it's definitely something like there's times when like how you mentioned, like I play a weekly Monday game and a bi-weekly Wednesday game. And then once a month I have our Strixhaven and then Alderaan.
Our weekend of dun-da-da.
Our weekend of dun-da-da. And and that is like an intense, like we're literally like a dual feature 2-day special.
Yeah.
48 hours.
Yeah, a good section of the party is coming down explicitly for the purpose of playing.
And finding more bandwidth for more games is very difficult, but it's also like you do have to sit there and be honest with yourself and be like, what can I handle and what is a little too much, and when do other responsibilities start to take a back step to these fantasy games that give me the good serotonin
for sure.
That I'm craving like a feral animal at all times.
Like, and I feel like if you were gonna add anything else at a well spaced out component. The Dragon Age one makes the most sense because you have such an encyclopedic knowledge of Dragon Age.
I do, and it would
that it's
be a lot
inherently with just like the story and what's going on, like you know enough where you don't really have to do research or learn that, and you could kind of just pilot us around through that and go with what the plot is and then make up anything else that you didn't like or wanted to change.
You've literally seen the way that I am. Like, you started playing Dragon Age, and I would just be watching you stream it, and I might not like even be paying attention immediately. I'm like on my phone, and you're like, I can't find this thing, and I would look up for the first time in like several hours.
The fucking shards. Yeah. And you would find the shard like immediately.
And I'm like, I recognize that tree. Like, I know exactly where you at. And like the map is huge, but I really do know every square inch of that game.
Like I know where this 1 pixel in the hinterlands is, where this mushroom that you need. Jesus Christ. Okay. Like it was helpful because I would get annoyed and couldn't find things, and like I'm like, I'm baby, find it. Listen, I don't claim to be good at video games. So I'm like, I will phone in a friend.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's one I feel like as you consider, it's easier to consider that than like running a whole
homebrew,
a whole new friend.
Yeah. And I guess technically like you could find more bandwidth in like pre-made modules and stuff like.
Yeah, but we're not gonna do that.
I know.
Like
I'm saying this.
Other people that are less neurodivergent could do that. It's not us though, because we've both bought modules to start DMing, and we're like, hey, we're gonna run this, and then we started reading it, closed the book, and said, fuck that module, I'm gonna do what I want. And then we did a bunch of nonsense, realized that it still has to be structured on some amount of plot scaffolding, and then have tried to reconcile the chaos we've wrought with the written material. And I'm talking to myself more than I'm talking to you, because I'm running a system that none of us have fucking played before. And like the one thing, I could have just had y'all be the fucking heralds that have been dead for like in fucking the vampire freezer for underground for a long ass time, and we could have run it normally. But I was like, did I do that? No, we're gonna make up a bunch of complicated history for everyone. And now I need to interweave them.
It do be a game of like you said, like we open the book, we toss it over our shoulder, and then we like kind of ashamedly go find the book again.
And then like 2 hours later, we're scrabbling across the floor like a roach to go get the book and try to make it all make sense. And I'm like, why are we like this? We could just not.
We could make our lives so much easier, but then no, why would we?
But also, like, our players would not follow that module.
Absolutely not.
Like, Lost Minds of Fanderlin, or Fander, however the fuck you say it, does not account for, like, someone making a host club in the middle. Like, that's not.
No.
That's not in the source material.
That's not in the written source material, and I do have to improv all of that. But as a general statement towards not us specifically, but like you could ideally, like if you wanted to run a more strict module and you
totally could. Yeah,
you totally could, and you could find a little more bandwidth because it does do a lot of the legwork for you.
Yeah, especially like the mechanics of like figuring out the fights and like how many enemies there are, and like how all that, like how much hit points these thick rats got, like all that.
Thick rats.
It's always rats at the beginning. It's rats or it's spiders, and I'm arachnophobic, so it's rats.
It's always rats
because we can't have spider sacks. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it do be a matter of just understanding your bandwidth, understanding how much realistic time you can devote to either playing or running games.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you touched on like the neurodivergencies of us as players, because like outside of like that burnout topic, the player engagement,
for sure,
which is something that like I think our group, this group that we're currently running with, we don't have a problem with player engagement.
No, definitely not in person.
Not in person.
Because it's immersive if we're the one role playing, and then if we're not the one role playing, we're so invested in each other's stories that it's like watching a soap opera, right? So that's not a problem.
Yeah. But I have had, for example, like we had some players that like were with us previously in that campaign. And they like, although everybody at my table has some flavor of neurospicy.
Sure.
They particularly like the ADHD was like pretty up there with
yeah,
them.
and they had a hard time, like, you don't have a ton of control over what you hyperfixate on, but they weren't hyperfixating on the game like the ADHD babies we have now do. They were hyperfixating on like a phone or like other things or things that were uninvolved, and so that gets a bit tough sometimes.
Yeah. And like there was also elements of like I as a DM had to adjust a little bit because I remember them talking to me of like, hey, like, is there a possibility we could have like maybe more frequent breaks like in between? Because like I got so used to the fact that like we tend to run for like
that's
several
true.
hours.
Yeah, because we used to have a couple players that were brand new and like hadn't played. We'd met post, split from Ravenloft, and they were like new to this. And then we're like, "Hi, welcome to the welcome to the hell week of RPGing." So it's like this is not normal, but it is what we're doing. Yeah, and so like, but that was also helpful too because we're like, yeah, we could use a break. Yeah, we could use like a cracker and a dream,
especially to handle the burnout because like, oh man, like also, and I think this is a universal experience. Like when you out here DMing, you fully forget all bodily functions.
Yeah,
it like at all, and I'm just like, I'll go through our whole fucking session, and then I'll realize I have not had a drop of water or a bite of food, nor did I feel the need to.
I do that when I'm playing in our Strixhaven campaign, but like also definitely when I'm DMing too.
But then after the fact, I'm like, oh, cool. I feel like dying.
Yes. Like, I am a shell of a human.
I am a shell of a human.
It's like that meme of that skeleton like sitting on the bench, and that's when the person's like been there and rotted away.
That's me. That's me after every game. Tag yourself at me. But yeah, no, I'm like a void of hunger, and like my brain is mush and I can't function. But yeah, like I remember having to adjust for them needing more frequent breaks and things like that, and because I wanted them to be as engaged and active, and like so there's a little element of like adjustment whenever depending on like the player makeup that you have
for sure
at the table. But I also remember like my first session that like my first D&D game that I ever played was with a friend of mine, and like I think I referred to this in a past episode. But it was a friend who just wanted to run a game, and like, I was like, I've never touched Dungeons and Dragons, but I am nerdy, play video games.
Yeah, like I'm interested.
I'm here.
It's adjacent.
And it was him as the DM, me, and like two other guys that I knew of them. They weren't really like close friends of mine by any means.
Yeah, you were in college, yeah?
Yeah, I was in community college, like my first year of college. Right. And it was a real bad example of like what D&D is for sure, because the other two players were like very much not invested at all. They were the type of players that were like sitting there on their phones the entire time.
Yeah.
They like pretty much only pay attention whenever there was like combat, and even then it was like I cast my strongest spell or do my hardest hit, and as soon as their turn was done, they're like fucking zoinked
out. Check back
out, like zero engagement when we were like in any town or like had any moment where we had to talk to an NPC type of thing. Like I remember I was like, I know I've never played this game before, but I know this is not
yeah, you're like, this isn't the way to do it.
No. And I was trying to pull so much weight in like interacting with the NPCs and other stuff, and like I felt so bad for him because he was you work really hard on.
Yeah, that's tough as like a DM. And just as a person in general, it's like when you're in a conversation and you can tell that no one's listening to what you're saying, and like it sucks. And then you add on that like you have done some level of like work to figure out this like fantasy tapestry that you're taking everybody through, and it's like that it sucks. And like there are people who, because neurodivergent things, like they're on their phone and they are paying attention, and it's like if that's you and you communicate that, then like you're not the problem. But the default of that is like, okay, it just seems like you're checked out.
Exactly. And like I think back on that, and like I'm like, bro, if I was the DM and I saw people on their phones while I'm like trying to tell this story, like whatever, I don't think I would want to do it,
Yeah, I don't either.
And And I can't necessarily say in that specific situation, I don't think it was a fault of the DM, because I
No.
think he was like, in my opinion, he was running a good game. Like I
Yeah.
was interested and I was engaged and all these stuff, but like it is important to find a good combination of people that are like as invested in the game as much as you.
True, and that like to play the same style of game that you do. That's a lot of
Mhm.
it too, where it's like it's people who only like combat and the nitty gritty side of it and check out when it's time to like talk to villagers, then you got to minimize that bit. Where if it's the opposite, then you can expand on the role play or find some middle ground. And like also, there are some people that don't care
Yeah.
that people are on their phones, like it doesn't bother them. But I think for me, be it an anxiety thing or whatever, it would bother me and like my tendency to be critical of myself anyway would be like, oh, I'm not doing a good enough job to keep these people engaged,
Yeah.
whether it has anything to do with me or not, right?
Yeah, 100%. The only reason I would ever have my phone on me and like actively looking at it is if I'm using like
D&D
D&D Beyond,
Beyond. Yeah.
uh, because I didn't bring my dice or I don't have my character sheet by chance or something like
Yeah,
that.
I did that for a bit in Strixhaven until I got Anya's binder. I just
Mhm.
ran her on D&D Beyond. But yeah, I'm not in like my favorite games. Yeah, I'm not on my phone either. I'm
Yeah,
engaged in what's happening because I want to know and I need to be aware of like what the fuck is going on.
100%. And like we also had an experience where like we tried to, with our group that we normally play in person, we at one point tried to do an online game.
I hated that online game. I'm so sorry. I'll just say it with my whole chest. I've never been so fucking bored.
Yeah, and it's
I
like,
don't know what it was. I think some of it, I mean, I do know what some of it was, and it wasn't related to actually the game of D&D, but online is a very different user experience than
yeah.
being in person, and I think like I wasn't as invested in the plot of like in the setting as I was in Ravenloft, and I don't know. I couldn't flip that switch in my brain where I really cared about my character and the other characters and the plot and all of that.
It was a
And it's
little
like if
difficult.
I can't flip that switch, then I'm always gonna be a little bit checked out, even if I'm like full scale, like making myself be as consciously present as I can.
Mhm.
It's very different than if it's a character that I'm invested in and I'm like, give it to me.
Yeah, and I know like our friend Bex, for example, she mentioned that like it was a combination for her. It was a combination of like we didn't have cameras on, so like you couldn't really like see people, and it was like Bex's first real experience at like playing an online game.
Yeah,
And so like she wanted like the facial reactions of people like while we're role
true.
playing and stuff like that, so not having cameras on.
Because to be fair, like we're not voice actors. We do a lot of physical acting.
Yeah,
All of
like
us.
it's reading off of other people's body language. And then on top of that, it's the element of like, yeah, it is online. So like I feel like your mind is more tended to drift, because like you're just staring
Yeah.
at you're not staring at people across the table from you. You're staring at an idle map, and like not much is going on there.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you're listening to the DM kind of go on and stuff, but there's a tendency for the mind to wander, especially
Mhm.
if like the scene does not technically involve your character in that moment.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
I feel like that drops player engagement like in tears until you're like kind of fully checked out.
Yeah, definitely for me it does. And I mean, I know like everybody is different and like we've all had periods where like there wasn't an option to play in-person D&D. And so like if online is the only thing you can make work, yeah, that can certainly be better than not playing at all, but there is just such a difference in playing
Yeah.
in person
Yeah.
for me. And like when it comes to engagement, yeah, I don't know if that's a neurodivergency thing or just it's easier to treat it like improv or collective theater or something where you can slot in and the story and the characters feel real more so when you're in person.
Yeah. I think the body language, like being able to read somebody's body language while they're sitting across the table from you, is important, and I think it helps a lot with that interpersonal like player engagement, as well as them being engaged in the story. Because like for me, every time I've sat at a table, even if the scene doesn't involve me, I'm still actively watching other people play it out,
Yeah.
and that keeps my mind like interested and focused. And
Yeah, it's like an active rest. Like you're not having to use your cognitive brain in that moment and be sharp and reactive and responsive, but you're still in the story and watching and being aware. And all of that it's a different kind of fun, but it's just as enjoyable to be able to kind of pass that torch.
Yeah. And I think it's also easier for the DM as well to be able to read like when to switch scenes and like
when to take a break
and and all of those kind of like signs and stuff like that. But I can also think of a lot of like online games that I'm currently playing in that like I think there's also an element of, especially if you don't know the people as well going into it, player engagement.
That's a lot of it for player engagements. I feel like if you know your players well, then obviously you can read them as people better, and so and you know what they like and what they enjoy the most, and where y'all are compatible and where you're not, and that just makes it easier to craft an experience that fits.
100%. But like as opposed to, I think like I notice a very big difference in a lot of the online games that I've played, because in both instances of the games that I've joined online, I came in complete stranger to like the majority of the party, which was always like adding an element of nervousness for sure on my end. But then in the engagement in the very beginning, I would say like for me personally, like these are people that have like established played together or whatever. And so like sometimes I could feel myself kind of like zoning out a little bit. And I was like trying to actively like pay attention because I'm trying to learn lore. I'm trying to like whatever.
And like catch up.
And it's also that element of like my character hasn't clicked for me yet. Like, yes, I've made her. I'm starting to play her. But there's a little bit of like a period of time in the first few sessions that you're slowly starting to fit yourself into the narrative and getting invested and like feeling like your character.
Yes. And like that character concept that you have, like when you actually put them into motion and play, does it click? And it's like, it was funny with like your Strixhaven campaign for me, making my character Anya, like she was one of the hardest. I had a harder time coming up with her character concept than I think I ever really have. And I think part of that was also coming out of that Ravenloft campaign and the circumstances in which that ended, and just being kind of burnt out and feeling a bit, I don't know, like
dissatisfied.
Yeah, dissatisfied and just like disillusioned with D&D a bit, and sad about that. And then like knowing that if I could hype myself up, it would be great. But then like once her character concept clicked, I was like, okay, I've got it. And we're off to the races. But then like in our Alderaan campaign, I started out playing a gunslinger, and I played like 2 sessions with her, and like it was fun in combat because gunslingers do buku damage and she has a sharpshooter. But any kind of like in role play situations, I just wasn't enjoying piloting her around. It just wasn't fun for me. And then so I switched to Maeve, my Way of the Long Death monk, and she's just in a fun, goofy, creepy mood all the time. And I get to be chaos incarnate. And that immediately clicked for me. I'm like, okay, this is like, we played that session. I'm like, this is fun. The first session that like I played Maeve, it was a marked difference in like my experience in that game, just because I had found the right character, and so it was so much easier to be engaged.
I think so too. Like it's now thinking of it from the perspective of like as a DM, I'm like, oh, that's a good thing to know of like if you're ever kind of noticing that some player is not super engaged in the story, it may just be that their character is not clicking. And it may just be like a matter of like, hey, we should sit down and like figure out either why this character is not clicking. Like, do we need to add more to your backstory? Do we need to flesh this out a little bit more? Or do you just need a new character in general?
Yep. And I think that was I just wanted to hit reset because like I didn't really know why I was having a hard time getting engaged in the Alderaan campaign, because I love the setting. It's the 4 of us and then the DM Teddy and Chrissy, and they're both great. And so it's like the people are cool, and
it's in person.
And it's in person. It's like, but it just wasn't clicking for me. And then I was like over analyzing it wasn't clicking, and then I was stressing myself out and getting anxious and trying to mask, and then getting anxious over the fact that I'm not supposed to be masking around people. And it was just like a tidal wave of nonsense, and I was like, this is not sustainable. And because we play them like once a month, we'd only play, like it happened like the first time I was like, that's the first session. The first session's kind of a wash, right? You never know. You don't count that one. It's like when you get home from getting your hair cut, you're like, I've got to fix it myself before I judge it. But the second session, I felt the same. I was like, fuck. I didn't know what to do. And I was like, I think I just need to wipe the slate and start over.
Yeah.
With just a more chaotic character that had like my gunslinger character had a lot of like darker, hefty stuff in her backstory that like I brought in, which I generally love to do. But I also think like the emotional labor of that was maybe a bit too much in an environment with people that were new. And it's just I'm like, let me just make a fucking weirdo that has plenty of potential to have fucked up shit have happened and happen to her in the future. But like, let me just bring in the bitch who does a daily blood sacrifice to something.
Yeah. And like I remember and I've mentioned this before in the Ravenloft campaign when I was having issues with like playing Cadence. Like I was engaged in the sense that like I loved watching other people's like scenes play out. But then when mine happened, I felt so much like dread because I didn't feel comfortable in my character and I didn't like it was like those moments of like I would rather not have the scene focus on me right now because I would rather just watch.
It's like if I can just watch everybody else and then when it comes to combat, like I'll hop in then.
Yeah.
But if I cannot RP, that'd be great. Which is odd for both of us to feel
because
that
we're
way.
Very big on the
very
RP.
much. Yeah.
And once I switched, it was funny enough because like towards the end, everybody loved my little robot so much. But I switching to the other character who then was like everyone was so suspicious of and like the in character dynamics were like animosity a little bit, but like I also was like I feel so much more comfortable playing her because I could turn my brain off to that like voice of like am I playing this character right. Like Cadence just wasn't fitting for
sure
me. I loved her concept, I loved everything about her, but like it just wasn't clicking for me as a person. And then being able to play Anima was like okay, I am like fully comfortable in this and I don't have to think about my responses. I can be very natural in my responses and I'm having a much more pleasant time in those last few sessions that I got to play with her.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a great example and a longer version of what happened to me with Alderaan. And like but it was interesting because like after you kind of decided that you were eventually going to switch, toward that end, like you had some really good couple sessions with Cadence.
Yeah.
Where it's like I think
I took the pressure off myself.
Yeah, it was like
because I was like, this bitch is dead in the water.
Some kind of weird like narrative death rattle where it's like, okay, I know I'm not gonna play you forever.
Her death certificate.
Yeah, so it's like you got to enjoy like a last couple sessions really playing her, and then switch off.
Yeah,
and that was really interesting too.
Yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, I think ultimately, like at the end of the day, when it comes to the GM burnout, it's a lot of you need to be realistic about how many games you can handle, both playing in and running in and all
your
of
capacity,
understanding what your prep work looks like and how taxing that might be.
Yeah.
And then, fitting that in where it fits most comfortably. I think like we've harped on sustainability a couple of times in the past couple episodes.
Yeah.
You need to be able to make sure that like you're being responsible about your level of energy and like how much you're dedicating to this ultimately like very passionate little hobby that we all love and care about so much. And making sure it's not becoming like detrimental to your mental health and other things, because like as we've mentioned many times, like you should also be having fun. Like
for sure.
It's a labor of love for sure, but it shouldn't like be completely
like
laborious.
your players can tell if you're not enjoying it or if you're doing it because you feel obligated to, or if you'd really rather not. Like it's obvious, as obvious as it is when like players aren't engaged. It is just as much with the DM, if not more so, because they're running the train.
100%.
So yeah, like we harp on like sustainability and figuring out what works for you and communication and all of that a lot, but I think it is a lot of what these things come down to. It's like it's all the same shit.
So it's a full circle.
Yeah,
the circle of the D&D TTRPG life,
literally.
But yeah, making sure that you're engaging in games as sustainably as possible so that you can still maintain that fun. And then when it comes to like player engagement, there's obviously like lots of differences between player engagement and pros and cons to both online and like in-person games.
And it depends on your players, and that's all like talks you can have if you're worried that someone's not engaged. Like, like what does you being engaged look like? Because that might look different. You know, the note taker is going to have a different version of engaged than like the person who's like the most prolific role player, you know, using this to brush off like their Shakespeare days, right? Like there's
the retired theater kid
versus the person that's like memorizing through their spells to try to come up with like the craziest combination of things to do. Like engagement can look a lot of different ways. I think like having those conversations are important.
Yeah.
But
and I think both as the DM, looking out for engagement to make sure it's like if you've got neurospices at your table, it might just mean you need more breaks or you need to do some accommodation for that.
Yeah.
Or B, like, which I hadn't even thought about till we talked about it on this episode, was like maybe someone's lack of engagement is due to their character not necessarily really clicking with them.
For sure.
And being sure to either address that to see if like there's additional work that needs to be done or if they need to switch out a character. Like I like that we kind of like harped on like a potential like a warning sign to kind of look out for.
Yeah, I like that too, because it's good to like destigmatize if a character's not working for you. Like that's not a cardinal sin.
It is okay,
and like you can save them for a one shot,
send them over the rainbow road, and maybe they'll be pulled over later.
The rainbow bridge.
The rainbow bridge. But yeah, and then understanding like the differences between why players might be less engaged in an online game versus in person, and like how you can maybe try to mitigate or fix that. Online games, like maybe possibly like start including like face cams so that people can actually like look at each other and see the expressions and read more body language. Like a lot of people run like real play games online that everyone's recording remotely, and most of them from what I understand like have like video cameras on because you want to be able to see like the people and how they react, and like those moments, especially in those big drama moments where like something big happens, you want to see the shock on people's face.
Yeah. And like there's also a lot more like cool 3D modeling and like different online dungeon build up. Like obviously a lot of people use like the Roll20 maps, which have like some cool interactive things, but there are even things that go deeper than that where it looks like you're virtually, you know, going like into a room. Yes. And so like maybe something like that can make a big difference in player immersion.
And it's a lot about finding the tools that work best for you, I think, in those respects, and to keep player engagement alive, both in person and online. And at the end of the day, you know, it's just a game. It's not that serious. You should be having fun at all times, and making sure that you as the player are recognizing when you're lacking in engagement.
Yes.
And maybe communicate that need. And as a DM, maybe look out for it and see how you could address it.
And as a DM, be aware of where you're at. And I think you touched on this before, but like it's good to take pauses like during the game to sort of enjoy what's going on around you and be mindful in that moment. And then also after the fact to like check yourself and your own emotional health and energy level and like where you're at, and feel free to adjust the cadence or the length you're playing or whatever as much as you need to, so that you're having as much fun as your players are.
Absolutely. There's no one way to like really run it. It's fully it's a beautiful space where you can customize it literally to every possible need that you have, to the group that you have, to the DM that you have, and do whatever feels best for you.
Yep.
Well, that is our episode for today. I hope you guys are gonna do great this week, and we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye. Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddyscites.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.